Well, you realize that we scientists underestimated the sophistication of the human brain.
When it comes to the value you bring to your work or in life, your most vital skill, your greatest ability as a human being, is your ability to think critically. Join us as we point out how our brains tend to lead us down some bad paths and what you can do to take control and get right.
Brain Prophets, are you ready?
Yep.
Then let's start the show.
Sitting on your shoulders is the most complex object in the known universe.
She's like, "Oh, aren't you going out of town?" I was like, "No, but since you think I am, or thought I was, I'm gonna take the time to go exercise." So I went outside I hadn't done this in like, oh man, I hadn't done this in a really long time. So Saturday, I took the girls on a walk, put them in the stroller. We got those two-seater strollers, and I put them in the stroller, and we went on like a 2-hour walk, just up and down the neighborhood. Walk probably maybe like a couple miles. The youngest baby fell asleep. The other baby was like cool. She was up for the walk. And so she walked. So she was just chilling out with me. And if I stop too long, she stands up in her seat because I don't lock her in. But it's kind of funny. But we had a good time walking. And then Sunday I got to go play pickleball.
Nice.
Which is great exercise for me. And I missed it. And I purposely, a lot of older people play it. So so what I do is I'll go up there and I'll either jump on a team if they need one, or if they have a couple people waiting, I'll play 2-on-1 or 1-on-2. And I'm one there too. And so yesterday I played with some decent players that are, older, but I didn't lose, man. I won all my games. So that was nice. I was running around like a crazy person, but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Great exercise. I burned 600 calories out there. So
How do you
that was
know
good.
that?
Because my watch says, if I'm trusting the watch, testing my Samsung Galaxy Health Watch, which we should, hopefully one day we could have a following where we get sponsored by those, the fitness watches to tell people what they should be doing. But yeah, that's how I guess I know. It's got all my measurables, so it tells me how much it thinks I should be burning. Which is always funny to say that you burn so much calories. Most people, we're gonna have this in the show, but you're always burning calories. If you're awake, even if you're sleeping, you're burning calories. So it's just that you're burning more calories, or I burned more calories in a smaller amount of time, or in the same amount of time than I would have burned any other time if I just sat there being sedimentary. And I didn't. There were some things I wanted to watch, but I decided to get up and move. So that was good stuff. What about you, man? What's going on in your life?
Not much.
I
I think
So today we're going to talk about, get going with remote work. So we know a lot of people want to work remotely. They want the hybrid work environment, but how does that impact one's brain? The new CEO of Amazon, I don't actually should say he's new, just the CEO of Amazon. And most people think about Jeff Bezos, but the CEO of Amazon is actually a guy named Andy Jassy. And he wants people to come back to work 3 days a week. He ordered that a little while ago, earlier this year in February. And, some people are up in arms, but there's a good reason why people should be kind of wanting to go back to work, at least I think half of the time, is not maybe a little bit more. And we're going to jump into that today. Philippe, man, what's it doing when it comes to this issue of hybrid work? Are you in support of, or are you against it? Especially since you're a hybrid worker.
I'm not a hybrid worker. I mean, when I see
You're
patients
remote, right?
Yeah, when I see patients in that typical doctor format, I am straight remote. To
So how do you feel?
Well, initially with telemedicine, especially teleneurology, I thought that there was going to be a lot to be lost, right? Because from a neurological perspective, the neuro exam, our ability to examine somebody,
Right.
is incredibly important. To be able to lay hands on somebody can be very healing. To be able to lay hands on somebody allows us to detect certain things like weaknesses that you may not be able to detect um, virtually. And also, it's about that connection that you make with the patient. So, there are some negatives, but there are also some positives, right? So being a remote doctor allows me to see patients all over the country in parts of the country where they don't have access to a neurologist, right? They may not have access to certain types of doctors. And it allows me to see them in emergency situations as well as potentially sort of like a follow-up. So I think like anything else, there's a trade-off. It depends on what the big goal is, what the goal is for the individual, what the goal is for the company, right? And I think that's things that kind of need to be worked out.
Right. But your job is a little bit different than most. You know, how much collaboration do you do even if you were in person
How much collaboration with who?
with coworkers or any other professionals?
Oh, there's a lot of collaboration. I mean, even now there's collaboration, right? So I need when I'm examining somebody, it's best if there's a nurse in that room so I can ask the nurse to do some things, and I'm sort of trusting the nurse's exam. Um, I'm talking to radiologists, I'm talking to ER doctors, I'm talking to primary care physicians, like about this patient that I'm seeing that may be in freaking South Dakota, right? So there is a lot of collaboration taking place, the same way that there's a lot of collaboration that takes place if I'm seeing somebody in the hospital. The experience may be different. It's certainly different, I think, from a doctor perspective, and it's different from a patient perspective. A lot of patients are like, who is this guy seeing me on this robot? Right. So, that it's not what they expected. But again, it allows them to have access to a neurologist when they wouldn't
Normally
necessarily
not.
have that. Yeah.
That's a good point. Now, so interestingly enough, there was a study that was done by Microsoft of all people back in 2020 that had people go through a in-person kind of check to see how their brains were conducting themselves during like in-person meetings and then virtual meetings, and they noticed something pretty interesting, and that it was that the brainwave patterns that were associated with stress and overwork were much higher when people were collaborating remotely than they were in person. Which would suggest that the cues that you get trying to do things through the medium of visual, like we're doing kind of now, versus what happens, the inputs your body kind of receives in person, noticing body language and having that, I guess, that third sense calms down kind of how you understand the communication that's happening around you.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. No, I think you've got to focus more, right? I think that you're using vision as your primary sense. You're not using any of your other senses, right? You're not using touch. You're not using, smells. Like as a doctor, it's funny. I can walk into a room, and depending on the smell in the room, I can tell you if somebody's about to pass away. Right. So you're not using all of these other sort of cues. And to your point, body language is incredibly important. And so for that reason, you do have to focus. Like I got to stare at a screen, right? And vision is the only one of our senses that has an entire lobe, the occipital lobe, dedicated to it. So now we're just really sort of working that occipital lobe, right? And so this is why people get like Zoom fatigue, because they're just so focused and they're just constantly using one sense as opposed to using every other sense that they have, every other cue that their body could receive from the environment and the person that they're interacting with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you, and not to jump, say on you, but too much on your work, but is yours meetings kind of like Zoom based, like visual medium like that, video meetings when you talk about collaborating with the different type of doctors and nurses, or is it sometimes phone calls and then, just
Yeah. So the patients,
emails?
it's always some Zoom or video medium based. Usually the nurses too will be on the, on the video. But yeah, then the doctors, it's picking up the phone, calling different doctors,
No, so it's
right?
not just the regular thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But then I'm like, I've got two screens, right? I've got two computer screens that I'm going back and forth at. So it's certainly different. There are plenty of times where I'm exhausted more so than I would be if I was seeing, you know, patients sort of on the ground in the hospital.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing too is like, at least when you are, so I think you have to be sort of really careful and strategize how you work from home as well as how you work sort of in person. But from home, you can easily just sit down for the entire shift, 12 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is, right? And so that takes the physical toll, you know, that also drains your body, it drains your brain. And so one of the things that I've got weights right next to me, and I will certainly work out and do some stuff on the down times or in between patients. I'll get up, I'll walk around, so I make sure I'm not just sort of just in that one place, constantly looking at a screen, because that's not good for you.
Yeah. Do you have the one of the Apple watches that tell you to get up? It's time to move.
No, I don't. I
Oh,
just
okay.
listen to
Well, you
I
listen to
listen
your
to
body.
the numbness in my legs or something.
Uh, well, I know that if you have a smartwatch, a lot of times those things come off and say, "Hey, it's time to move. You've been sitting around too long." But it's
Yeah.
really interesting. Well, the other part that well, between what we kind of both do is uh in helping people get better. What the work environment does for somebody that thinks like, no, being home is going to be better for me, is it gets your mirror neurons kind of firing in the right way. We kind of don't realize how much being in the thick of a fight, or not really a fight, but being in the thick of a work environment, working towards collective goals with other people's, actually lends to our ability to work towards that same thing. It's like an even if it's, you don't think it, is there slightly inspirational thing that's happening inside of your brain, being engaged by your mirror neurons that are behind um, pushing you to engage in what is known as a low stake game, which is what work kind of is, right? You're trying to win, but there's no, like, there's no life or death behind it. So we call it a low stake game. And by putting yourself in that environment, being around other people that have similar goals to yours, your brain says, hey, I think it's going to be beneficial if we try to push forward too, because those people are around you. Your thoughts on the brain's ability to have their mirror neurons involved in working and engaging prefrontal cortex stuff as well.
Yeah, I think for people who don't know what mirror neurons are, so mirror neurons are a group of neurons in your brain that essentially help you mimic the actions of others. So, for example, if I scratch my nose and you're in front of me, you're more likely to scratch your nose. And it's thought that mirror neurons have developed essentially so we can empathize with one another, right? Because we are social creatures, and so that empathy is incredibly important. But what neuroscience has also found is that the more time you spend with people, not only do you know sort of your mirror neurons align, but your neurons start to operate at similar frequencies, and so this is certainly really beneficial when you do have similar goals, and you're working on similar projects. Um, the reality is that we are social creatures. The reality is that what makes our brains so incredibly phenomenal and neurons incredibly phenomenal and important is that they are able to communicate and connect with one another. And one of the things that I often tell people is that we need to act more like neurons. We need to communicate and connect with one another. When neurons are not communicating and connecting, some kind of brain disorder happens. When people are not communicating and connecting, right, that's when conflict occurs. That's when war happens. That's when separations occur. Divorce happens, right? So certainly connecting with people is incredibly important for the success of any endeavor.
No, you're right. You're right. And circling back to a little bit to your you said you had your exercises at home. Having the right having that right type of push or setup, right? Maybe an ergonomic setup to kind of help keep you kind of movement and movement and emotion will help that as well. I was considering, even for me, I come into my office pretty much every day. So I'm having interaction with people all the time. But I think about even creating a space where my desk is one of those ones that it pushes up a standing desk more so than just the one where I'm sitting down, to try to keep on my feet from sitting in the chair as much. So no, but yeah, wanting to have the space where we're communicating in a positive way and letting our brains kind of do the what would seemingly be almost supernatural thing. Just really so much the cool part about us is big too. Pushing ourselves to engage in ways that move us forward rather than take us back. And so, don't despise people that going back to the office. I mean, at least half of the time, 3 days out of the week, it ain't that bad, really. And if your brain's actually, even though you may not like it, it's probably pretty good. If you want to stave off things like brain fog and memory fatigue and things of that nature, going into the office is going to actually help you to have that little bit of a change of pace than what you'd be in your comfortability of your home. Being comfortable is not the best thing for your brain. So, any thoughts on that one?
Oh, yeah,
Agree or disagree?
no, I think I think that the reality is that we evolve when we are uncomfortable. And I certainly think going back to the office is definitely going to be best for the companies and allowing them to, to sort of grow their product lines and grow their services and accomplish their goals. I think that like I said before, there are benefits to being around people from an individual perspective, and not being around people causes isolation, anxiety, depression. So there's certainly some big benefits to being social, getting back to the offices, and and helping sort of move your companies, but as well as yourself forward.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And when you're at home, your focus you can be too hyper focused, which then really messes with you because we're not really geared to be focused on one little thing for too long of a time, right? So they say that you can, from optimal focus, only works out for as long as like 45 minutes. I don't know. And I guess, and if you look at people who maybe have some neurodivergencies, like, with ADD and ADHD, that may be even harder for them. But when you start trying to push past that, you try to push past 90 minutes of solid focused work, our ability to think at a high level starts to drop significantly. And so we definitely want to make sure, and then when you're in the office environment, I think that there's a lot of breakups or breaking into what you're trying to do that allows you to reset that focus so that you don't reach that fatigue, mental fatigue as fast as you would at home. So going back to being around people, being back in the office, it's not such a bad thing, and even though you may not feel this way, your brain probably will do better for it. And so I will say thank you for it. Anyway, so you heard it here first, people. Hybrid work's not gonna be bad for you. Your brain's gonna like it. And you heard it from the Brain Prophets. Use it or lose it. All right. Until next time, we're out.
All right, guys, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Brain Prophets. If anything we said in today's episode resonated with you, let us know in the comments section. We'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.